So Donald Trump, all veterans. We're going to open up, first we're going to open up talking about Hamas. Or I'm gonna expand to Hamas soon. Because I agree that we're doing the right situation by needing to take action there. I don't think we needed to declare all out war, but I understand we want to lay down that line in the sand. I would do it a different way. I argue that my way is a long-term strategy. That's what we've lacked in the Middle East most consistently for the longest time, is a real long-term strategy. Because politicians are always getting in here and trying to do something to bolster their career or make themselves more relevant politically. I mean, I argue Donald Trump. That's almost, you got to be careful whether or not you're launching this in a way where you're trying to maximize the value to yourself, or you're launching this in a way where it's really the best long-term strategy. Because if you're really launching the best long-term strategy, then you need my other parts of this plan. Now, Trump, I will say that I think that you target some different groups. I think you throw some numbers around that aren't always very accurate. Sometimes if you have a lot going on, it's easy to make that mistake, but you should be really focused on the presentation. Now, it's all getting very complicated right now. It's almost to the point where society needs to understand you're going to need somebody like Brandon almost, who can bounce around between all the pieces, and the person who creates the plan. But even then, like, I might be talking about, because you were talking about saving 55 billion and then talking about saving trillions very shortly thereafter, and I'm like, well, that's quite a disparity, like, but I've done things like that myself. So anyway, moving on. Here's the long-term plan that you need for Hamas. It relates to my strategy. My strategy centers around this logo. Okay, I'm going to win the hearts and the minds of the next generation, because I'm going to remind them their culture is what created a lot of these visions for religion. Now, I'm also going to stand up for their culture and say, hey, it has nothing to do with a failure of your culture or anything like that, that these conflicts continue. What's really happened is your part of the world has been configured by all these conflicts fighting over the Middle East, and now that has continued to propagate into modern day psychology. And so there's like this angst and this animosity that exists in that part of the world, where there's kind of like a distrust for different groups, and people have been cutting all these deals, and so it's very triggering for people. And that's why I think it's easier for people and to get radicalized by some of these terror groups. Now, long term, ultimately, we can't keep letting these terror groups get hold. We need some sort of long-term anti-terror software strategy, okay? And really how we build that is two-part. You want to be able to track known terrorists. Yes, that's an easier system to build. Harder system to build, but still very possible. You build an AI system that ties to 911 and can automatically call for alerts for people. Now, you can trigger this system and make something that you have to disarm later. Like if you feel like you're in danger, then there would be a response call like, hey, this is an AI checking call, and we're going to AI welfare call, and we just want to make sure you triggered your panic mode earlier, and we just want to make sure everything's okay. And if you confirm or you shut off your panic mode, then it won't queue a 911 response. Also, a cool thing you can do is you can automatically log conversations. This will help people in legal contexts. It will help reduce policing costs, and it will help people know that there's this system in the background, so people are better protected from people who are going to try to antagonize people. Like, there are reasons why school shootings and some different things happen, and so if there are these kinds of bullies that try to antagonize people, like, we're going to be able to catch that, okay? These different types of things that people can do that are kind of shady and passive aggressive, we're going to be able to catch that. I mean, we have to be careful how we police these things. We don't want to be, you don't want it to become too overbearing and not understanding of a large percentage of the human condition, okay? And that's another thing that kind of sometimes gets missed, I think, when people are standing up for rights for some groups, is they won't understand things that other groups have gone through, like with this situation that I think has gone on in the Middle East. And there have been transitions with monarchies and hurt feelings and perception of elitism and all these same things that are largely a grounding truth of how we were founded. And yes, this is all relevant in understanding how to create a long-term strategy there. Now, the Middle East once led when metal technology was the height of technology. They created some breakthroughs with metal technology. Now, it was at a point in science where it was hard to understand the breakthroughs, but they were messing with the science, and their culture led with Damascus steel was one of the most cutting edge ores of its time. Now, I know there's an argument that maybe some of the Viking swords and the Ulfbert swords were around the same time, and it's debatable how this world trade was moving around. But anyway, the point is that there were unique craftsmen and also I'm trying to talk about this religious piece, because either we fight over, like, that's what's going on with decentralization right now, and this relates to everything we fought over the 1900s. If this gets missed by the companies with decentralization, with decentralization initiatives, I argue it's because none of them have very close family members that are veterans that served in any of these conflicts, because they're not trying to understand, they don't actually care about the interrelated nature enough to really look for the opportunity to save the most lives. And you have to want to promote that, like, Russia got destroyed on the cavalry lines of World War One, and so they were afraid of being unprepared in the industrialization era. That's why they were more likely to go to communism and help ramp up their production. Now you look at that area, it's geographically more landlocked, whereas like Europe and the United States is an extension coming from Europe, and how Europe was leading the Industrial Revolution, that all spread to America very quickly because of the relationships in the waterways and how world trade was moving, and how things were a lot of things were happening in that part of the world at that time. And so that's why the industrialization and the waterways were a key part that enabled that world trade and enabled that industrialization. And so, whereas like the reason Russia was behind is it was more landlocked, they were going to be more behind because they didn't have the benefits of world trade as quickly. Now, yes, the United States had great initiative, was trying to pursue. We had some great leaders of economics, and that's one of the reasons why we succeeded. We want to actually help. That's part of how we win in the Middle East. We talk about how this is how we've been justifying these wars. Here's this more powerful economic system, which is also necessary for you guys to get these advanced anti-terrorist tracking softwares in place. Because if we ultimately want to stop groups like Hamas, we have to get their population excited about advanced technology. We could partner with them. I'm not totally against the military. I just want to make sure we are exploring every other strategy before we pull the trigger, okay? And I know that we don't always have time to do that, and we have to take action. Okay, not everybody has time to put together a plan like I have, but this is how we save the most lives. And if everybody doesn't take the time to understand this plan now, or if key people in the military don't take the time to understand this plan, yes, it's complicated. I'm going to try to keep this plan for how we succeed at this mission long term, because I have the best grounding strategy for all advanced treaty design. It's about mutually assured success, not mutually assured destruction. Not if you blow us up, we'll blow you up back. That can quickly escalate and get out of control. We need to be practicing something very different than that. So furthermore, we don't want to get to a point where, like we are today, where we have 24,000 nuclear bombs and they're not all accounted for, and that's enough nuclear bombs to like blow up in an instant half of the world's population. Like, that could very quickly happen. Like, that's not a necessary or useful thing. Okay. What is useful is to talk about, like in Hamas, if we want to maintain this alliance with Israel, there are certain, like, we have satellites, we can track certain things from space. We can't always see everything in that context, so we need deployable robots. Like in the Middle East, we're going to have carriers that we can deploy. Drone, like, we want to get to the point where we have torpedoes that we can launch robots from, like, or not torpedoes, but missiles that basically you slow the jet down to like 400 miles per hour. You deploy a highly specialized gliding tube that has hopefully you can get like an Optimus robot fairly, compact and in a packed position, but also it be very resilient, and you can damage these robots and it'll be fine. Now we're always these are to get a response on site, and Israel will probably have some of these as well. There will just be regions where it's advantageous to have different deployment systems. We might get to the point where we have these from space. That's going to always be very, very costly, because unless we can get to the point where we have a more advanced propulsion system overall. And I have a theory for that. I don't know if it's accurate, but it seems to be possible that we can use the springy effect of magnetism to create a relativistic engine. And by relativistic, I mean that it will always have a relativistic force. I don't think that we understand relativity as deeply as we do. Or I think that that's something where, depending on how we set up the experiment, it might look a certain way, and we need to set up really clever experiments. And this is getting to a point where it bumps up at the limits of my intellect, and I am not good enough at quantum, at some of those classes of math to really be able to draw my own conclusion. And so, anyway, but moving forward, we definitely need a response system, and we need to come up with a way of addressing terror and winning the hearts and the minds of the next generation. Now, if you can pump the value of the American system, like what all of our trade wars should relate around computer chips and how we can help you position your region. Now, we're going to partner with Israel because, again, we need to make sure that this chain of command works right. But here's strategic pivot so that your region can get translated. Here's how we're leading. And this is with very respectful to your privacy and all of these things. But here's the system and this automatic 911 alert system. This is going to help us with our terror tracking and ultimately stop these Hamas groups. And this is part of a long-term strategy that we need in order to win this war. And we're trying to do this by launching this symbol where we're honoring your part of the world. We're trying to be bold and say, now this is why communism failed, because they didn't care about the market design. And this is all about the art of the market design and organizing a government of the people to protect the free market dynamic in these very complex contexts, while also worrying about the transparency that we need for appropriate regulation with these very complex tools. One of the reasons why communism took hold is because people were it's as afraid as politicians are right now about making AI regulation and unsure about that. That is way more straightforward. There is way direct and clear research that you can do to get that answer. Whereas in the early 1900s, when communism took hold, the politicians were dealing with proven horrors of largely unknown things, like things that the potential was proven to be horrendous and vastly scary, with chemical weapons, atomic bomb. Chemical weapons were the 1920s and this turning point. Like, this was all happening, and the electrification of the world. And again, like, Russia fought its civil war on horseback largely. Like, they did have machine guns, but they were pulled around largely on wagons because they didn't have the industrialization. They didn't have like a lot of railways. They didn't have the ability to move resources around, and so they didn't have that. It was a way different kind of war, and they were caught very unprepared. And dealing with all those horrors and that reality, it's very understandable why they wanted to do a different government system to try to mobilize their economy and catch back up and do that quickly, because they lost more lives than anybody else in the world wars. Like, so it makes it's no question to me why this dynamic ended up playing out with communism. Now, we need to do something where we partner different with the private sector, and we should try to win Russia and China to but I don't think that we want to be talking bad about Zelensky. Trump, you said something about comparing Zelensky to a dictator. A lot of times when conflicts break out, political systems freeze up because they're worried about corruption and the other influence getting in to ultimately throw the war. And there are all these different fears, and so then you can't, it's not fair to make some of those comparisons. We need a long-term plan, and yes, Ukraine and Russia need to hold some sort of unified election that the UN, somebody has to try to work with them and like intervene in this case, like, and say, hey, this conflict has broken out and we need to get back to a free market system. Russia, you've been transitioning. We're going to make this giant case for everything that we've just fought over, but we need you to come to the table here. We need you to really understand what Zelensky's arguing for, with feeling like you guys are too elite, or your oligarchies and your networks are trying to control everything. This strategic pivot tool is how you open up that access to opportunity around a lot of these key decisions. And so here's how we can create this more advanced model where the businesses, you don't have to pick one business that controls it. All of the businesses come to the table democratically to control it. It's debatable whether 80-20 is the best model, and you drop the bottom 20% off and you only get the top 80% driving the top 80% of the market seats at the table. Because keep in mind, in my model, you also have a government of the people that can make adjustments to the addendums, but the major market, the businesses could get together, they have a voting structure, and they'll be able to veto things that maybe the politicians or whatever local government says the businesses have to do. But this is the dynamic that we've been fighting over, and communism and all of this is all the core mechanics of this. And so if we come up with this better system, again, we have to care about the art and how this is launched. It's the most important, delicate thing on the face of the earth, Donald Trump. And if you start honoring some of these other cultures in the right way, honor our soldiers too. This is to honor our soldiers. We don't want to continue to have to pull the trigger to defend this. This is the trigger that we want to pull. We would like to get everybody, we don't need a one world government, but every government needs to work together. And so having this extension system where we all acknowledge that we have to work with these, the private sector system is a system that exists in the world in the background anyway, and that's what can unify us. when we think about the mechanics and you look at these market problems, I have like a very realistic system. It's unique. It's appropriate for the challenges we face. I argue it is that next step. Now, this could be the ground of all modern treaty, and let's go into that in intricate detail now, Donald Trump, because it all starts with a more advanced identity access management grid. Okay, decentralization for this AT protocol, or even if you look at like the validation protocol that is Bitcoin mining, this could replace that. And in truth, a central system that companies work on democratically, it's now decentralized, but this is ultimately what they need to do to open up the access to opportunity and be most efficient at the same time. It's both of those things. Because just decentralization, how it gets marketed in the economy right now, is making things more expensive. There's a right way to make things more algorithmically complex and logistically simpler at the same time. And it's how you operate these platforms, because you can control who and how the data is encrypted. That's ultimately what this engine does. You can change, like even with Blue Sky's decentralization strategy, if you want to move your data from place to place, which really isn't necessary, you have all of the companies work together on a network that they manage and through different channels. And now if you change your data from Facebook to Blue Sky or to Twitter or X.com or Truth Social, what you're doing then is you're changing the encryption procedure. And when you change that umbrella, it changes over to another company, and then a process swaps that over. Who controls the encryption? You re-encrypt the data, and then you re-encrypt you change the access the access protocols fall under a different umbrella. They use a different network of affiliations for the overall encryption strategy, which is compartmentalized. And now you've built a way stronger, more sophisticated, secure system, which has more market opportunity, which is more efficient. And this is the overall market model that makes it possible. You need my major market vertical model. Now you can study my documents and have a team go study my documents. I can get those documents if anybody else watches this video and they want a copy of my documents. I believe in a social media user experience where I would be able to pick my Dropbox partner and you guys would see those things. Okay, they would be populated in my streamlined way that this user interface can work. And I think I might have removed, no, I still do have it in this 2 different version modes. And so, yeah, very complex, very about continued learning. I have a very specialized product strategy. So we start with Cyberforce, because if we have this more advanced security system, now we can trust all the data. Now we have a model which enables a Cyberforce and enables an advanced security system. Because now you have these security handoffs. You have chief security officers that manage these key security components. They manage a team that's updating a rotating algorithm, and maybe they even have this compartmentalized within their own team where there's somebody who's writing and configuring a parent algorithm, making subtle tweaks to that, and then there's somebody who's calibrating seed values that ultimately drive key parts of this rotating algorithm. But everything should work on a rotating security algorithm where there are algorithms that are driving a generation of a key that is rotating by timestamp, by device ID. You can do this, you can do some things by identity with how you're calculating and generating these timestamps, so that specific algorithms might do things differently for different parts of the alphabet or different age groups, and a combination of those factors. And then nobody will know how infinitely complex all of these different algorithms can be, and they're all rotating around, and they have all these different compartmentalizations and seed values, and to hack this overall platform would mean you need to hack all multiple of those things across numerous different companies, which would show up as part of an anti-terrorist tracking software, same thing. Like you would be able to see that certain groups and networks of affiliations are trying to infiltrate different networks. The only group that would even have a chance of doing this would be the local regional cyber force, and they would have to justify a military context or to truly internally hack the platform. Yes, you would have that capability. You could figure out anything internally, but you would, because you would be the ones who are primarily controlling that central system, but you could require approval from a network, from a support of the private sector in some contexts. You could also have contexts where it's life or death dependent, and to streamline operations, they don't have to do that. They might have to answer for that in an investigation process earlier, and you should make that trackable as our government of the people, because we don't want militaries to have the ability to do completely black book operations that they don't have to answer for. We just want to make sure that that the right chains of command get alerted about that somebody who doesn't have familiarity with the operation wouldn't really find out about it and then not understand kind of the context of a lot of what's being talked about. Okay, which could be a vulnerability. Like if a politician, we make it such that every politician can look into military black ops strategy, somebody might raise a red flag without really studying something. You need people who really study these things. Like it's important for saving lives. I understand that the military has strategies that they have in motion, and like you can't. But yes, we do want to make that such that it's trackable, and they do have to answer for that. And I do think we have a moderately good system designed where we try to disclose things, we have redacted things, and then we try to let things out later. And there's kind of a chain that we try to do for that. Anyway, I think that it's dangerous how we can try, how sometimes that's targeted. I think that if we build the right technological infrastructure for a lot of these things, it's safer for everyone rather than anybody coming in and even being perceived like potentially Donald Trump, like, oh, you're coming in like a dictator and you're forcing all these changes. We do want to talk about having the right tools for some of these changes for chain of command, especially. Like, this is getting very intricate. Okay, and so if you have this more advanced rotating security algorithm system, you've now decentralized a key part of these algorithms that even these companies aren't trying to decentralize yet. And you've got this much more advanced system. And so what do I want for this background logo while I keep on talking about this? I'm going to keep this Damascus steel texture. I'm going to bring you down to here and really try to come full circle again on talking about how I'm really trying to honor the Middle East and how they've stood up for some of the best parts of religion. A lot of these radicalized groups or these ideas that you're going to get 40 virgins or something like that. Think you can easily sell this to the next generation. Like, obviously for killing people you're not going to get that. Do you think that we're really the infidels when we're trying to open up all this access to opportunity? I mean, we're trying to stand up for your culture. Think about these dynamics. Like, you think about people fighting over your region historically, it would create more tension in your region. That's not anybody's, that if anything, that's outside forces' fault. Now I get why some of the radicalization happens, because they know that these outside forces have been like kind of tearing apart that region. It's been a part of the Crusades. It's been a part of controlling the trade for the region. Like, and it's tragic. And we should want to honor what this part of the world stood for and try to get these, like, if we want to get these answers for these Hamas groups, the whole reason why we're justifying it. If we can justify what we're doing right now with the war, we can justify this long-term plan. And this long-term plan is what we need, Donald Trump. You don't have that long-term plan. We need to win this long-term victory, the hearts and the minds of the next generation. We need the terrorist alert system. We need to be able to, yes, you can spend money on Space Force. I argue we should do more things with robots. And we should, because number one, you can launch those from jets and all kinds of things. You can have them on site faster. They can't die. The worst thing you have to worry about is the other side recovering it, but those things are so complicated now. The only thing you really have to worry about is them getting some of the mechanical strategies. Some of the digital and chemistry strategies are so hard to figure out, it's not going to matter if they have one of our robots. Again, the reverse engineering is so sophisticated to really understand it. There's very little real threat there, okay? And in most circumstances, we're going to recover all of those anyway. There's going to be almost no chance for them to recover scraps of damaged robots that can't return themselves to us. The only thing, you do have to worry about battery capacity to some extent. But again, that's why you want to have the capability of neutralizing a situation. If you launch one of these robots, like, your plan is to go in there and you're going to apprehend the suspect. Now, you don't have to worry about, you can take your time with shots kind of, because they can shoot at you. You just have to worry about if they have hostages or something like that. And again, if we have this anti-terrorist tracking network, you've built the right way, you build the 911 alert system, you have that run up through a chain of command, ultimately you can get to a point where 911s, regional 911s might, if they know it's a terrorist related activity like a school shooting or anything like that, we could run that up to a chain of command. We could have military response. We could have one of these jets scrambled within 5 minutes. We could probably have a robot on site to almost anywhere in the world within 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, that's not really long enough, especially when you think about how we have satellites to track these people, these groups. So if we have an alert system for getting us aware that somebody is being kidnapped or a terrorist attack might be playing out, and we can have a response time of 5 minutes and we can scramble something on site within 20, if we can maintain all of those capabilities with our networks of military bases and maybe having some military jets at regional airports that we can scramble in different contexts and small teams, and then we can get to the point where we can say, hey, to terrorists and to people who are going to have school shootings, you are going to be dealing with robots. Like, there is something that I mean, you got to be careful how you say this, because you don't want to say like we're definitely going to kill you, because some people want that. Like, you do want to have, our goal is to try to apprehend you and bring you to jail. You might succeed at killing somebody, but unless you unless you kill somebody at the very same time that you kill yourself, we're probably going to get you. Like, because if you kill somebody first, then we're going to kill you. And I mean, if you kill somebody first, then we're definitely going to shoot to wound, like in the knees, in the arms. We will first shoot to disarm you. We will then shoot to immobilize you. And we can create our AIs capable of doing this with very, very lethal precision. And they are not going to have to worry about getting shot. So they're going to succeed at this. And if we can scramble them on site 20 minutes and they can resolve their conflict within 10, we're going to have battery capacities for operational times of 30, 40 minutes. We can probably scramble, make this all work with what can fit in a pod. And again, you're going to slow down a jet. You're going to launch one of these pods. It's going to have like one robot in it, maybe two. You might launch like 2, 3 of these, 3, 4 of these. And maybe each robot comes with a little drone that will fly around, a little quadrotor with like 10, 20 minutes of battery capacity. And maybe it comes with some sort of little extra battery pack that it can swap itself out from wherever the military pod, the pod lands, because it's going to slow itself down and ultimately land and deploy this robot. Hopefully, it should land kind of like you use SpaceX's technology for this largely. I'm sure it's going to be harder because with a heavy jet, you don't have to worry about the wind as much. With something that's lighter, you do have to worry about the drift from the wind more. So I don't know how much of a logistical hurdle that makes for the technology, but this is the kind of system that we should. I can talk about creating military opportunity for contracts and like supporting that we want to have a strong military. I don't want us to be justifying sending kids to die if we don't have a long-term strategy to hopefully mitigate that in the long run. So this is why you need my strategy, Donald Trump. This is why what I have is so much more valuable. And it's harder to do than anything most people serving or most people in business or in politics will ever try to do, because I have way too many pieces that I've brought together. I've arguably brought together all the hardest part of art of the private sector with technology of the modern era, with operational strategy to uncover exactly the things that we need, efficiency and better security. We need those things. We need a long-term peace negotiating strategy, mutually assured success around how some of these computer systems and alert networks can work. That's what we can talk about. And that's a long-term victory. Like, that should be an easy sell, especially if you make sure that you really, really do a good job of talking about all the things that I'm trying to relate to this pillar. The tragedy of war, that we want this swords to plowshares mission, that we don't want to keep fighting over whose religion is the best or who's like, that's not what any of the religious leaders really were talking about. Not any of the ones who are most closely associated with prophet. They argued for peace, better strategies for how to be a better family as a world. That was largely what they talked about and why people aspired to be like them. And then radical groups have twisted this and somehow made it such about the tremendous honor of defending these people. And that's not... If you help people understand this and help people understand the access to opportunity and the things that really their religions are really fighting for too, like help them understand this and the honor that your part of the world is the reason why America even wanted this vision. It's why we're fighting so much for you. I hope you see that. We're going to try to say the same thing strategically to Russia and China, but also say, hey, you do want to have election. We are one of the major market verticals that I would argue for. It's debatable where you put it, where you put the product strategy and all of that. But one of the major market verticals we should have is for voting products. That's one of the things that we should have. Now, I would try to put that under a strategic, for accounting purposes, try to build a team that builds like a special political-based social media infrastructure variant that, again, like, I imagine these being layers to social media, and different platforms integrate these key roadways and infrastructures that really are built for specific product goals. That's just how technology works. And so we need to work together on infrastructure in this more advanced way. Otherwise, you end up with platforms that are these walled gardens. On all of the levels that we really need, we need the more advanced operational strategy that is my articles of incorporation. It is exactly my plan. The branding is exactly the long-term goal, the long-term mission that we need for the Middle East This is what all politicians and veterans, I need veterans to pull for this too. Again, I explained to you in intricate detail how I can lead. This leads to military prowess. I understand that if you can't draw that conclusion, my plan seems scarier to you because you're like, oh, you're potentially talking about working with technology company, other parts of the world with technology. And it's like, yeah, which will ultimately benefit our military and alert systems. It will ultimately help save our lives. Trust me, I have that plan. I explained that earlier. Anyway, if you don't understand that that's what my goal is with my mutually assured success, let's get to systems like that in place. Let's get to a point where I can go travel anywhere in the world. I don't want to go to the Middle East right now. No, I'm a little bit glad that we're having a war, but I think it's sad that we have to shoot over this every time. Like we don't have a long-term strategy that we're working on for peace, so all we can do is wait until things break down. I mean, our long-term strategy for peace is just vaguely try to have capitalism and try to kind of be like America. Like, but even America, we have problems we're trying to solve, and we need other people to come along with us to some degree. We can't just have all of these systems ourselves and then have no way to get the data that we need because nobody else has the systems. And we can't just expect to sell our systems to everybody else completely and have everybody else be excited to just buy technology that we're managing by ourselves. We have to kind of include them in the code reviews so that they can trust this. We have to help their workforce to understand it. Yes, we should make the requirement. We're going to give you the opportunity to build your team, but we're going to nominate people and we're going to approve people. But that's going to be our stipulation. We will then sell you the advanced processors. We will get China and Russia. We want to try to really control that part of the market. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you don't want to try to control capitalism, but you do want to say that this is important for our peace strategy. And so even governments, like, you have to do things that are kind of like controlling the economy to be strategic and protect our military. I mean, we didn't sell electric trains to Russia, to the USSR in the 1950s because we didn't want them to succeed in the Cold War. Like, we don't want to give them any chance to succeed, so we didn't even let General Electric work with them on that. We have to be better than that because we slowed down world progress by doing that. Yes, we were afraid of communism. Yes, we had reason to be afraid of communism. Yes, communism was a little bit was short-sighted. It was definitely short-sighted. It's never going to work long term, but that's why we shouldn't have justified the war. We should have came up with a better strategy. But we were afraid of the resources that a different government could have, and so we justified the wars. But we should have better strategies than that, okay? Like, we should, yes, I know that that's always a factor, but if we're working together on the code reviews, we're observing that, okay? This is the AI age. We have a doorway to a better strategy now. You have to understand the market. You have to really study all of these dynamics and how they're used in the industry. Code reviews, open source technologies, the concept of decentralization as it applies to the more advanced version of I was always going for democratization because that's what we really need, is a stronger model for a government of the people. That's what decentralization is even talking about, is that there isn't the access to the opportunity of these walled gardens. And so build this different model for these very critical layers that we have to have in order for free markets to exist and certain solutions to even be possible based upon the data flow realities. We need these kinds of layers. We need this kind of decentralization to ultimately succeed. It's what leads to the most valuable things, okay? My protocol, in fact, my approach to decentralization is probably one of the most valuable things. Conceptually, how do you monetize that, though? Well, you've got all these different teams that are each managing their security a different way, and you can build tools for managing this algorithm set. Companies can always maintain a specific percentage. It's kind of unnecessary to further encrypt a data flow as an additional layer. But at least now there's a copy, or there's an, well, because the thing is like, if you're in the situation where you're with like, oh, this is a little bit confusing. So if you're in the situation with crypto where you're trying to decentralize, and now I kind of lost my train of thought here a little bit. I need to go back. Darn, this video was so good. I wish I could just review this and go back. I wish I had an active audio transcript of what I was talking about. That would be a really useful tool for making presentations, because you could review, like, you could jump up and you could look at, like, glance at what you just read or just got done talking about, and you'd be like, ah, yes, that's right where I was. That would solve that problem. But so I'm trying to think of a way where if you're, because technically there's only a log of, you're technically only trying to log that the data was accessed and by who. And so if you secondarily encrypt something, now the information is already moved around. You can create a protocol where you need this second key, not just the resultant overall encryption key, but you can then stack that a second time. You still have to align all of the architectures to make this possible, because there are specific ways encryption, like you can't just create a cipher for certain types of text because you have different types of files with different data formats and different things, and to best encrypt that, you have to be looking at the files somewhat differently in some context. Now, maybe this is again bumping up on my limit of my intelligence. I don't know how sophisticated that. And once the information moves around, then it gets decrypted. In theory, unless there's somebody that can cipher all of those different keys, then both of the channels that they can move around. Which again, this is the reason why I wanted my architecture, is you get around to the point of having to send your key around somehow for it to be decrypted, your decryption key, which could then somehow be intercepted. Even if you do different channels, I try to think of different ways. Maybe you could scan local technology, even like the military, you could try to scan like local Wi-Fi technology. And you're right, it's some of this, but I think the industry has to work together like I'm talking about anyway in order for encryption to be as sophisticated as it possibly can be. And so you kind of have to be thinking about how these different products are aligned and how it all comes together and where's the best layer to optimize encryption and tie it into architecture overall, such that you have different types of data flows that can be encrypted in the best way for that type of data flow. And it's true, I don't know all of these hard limits. That's one of the big limitations. But I picture this overall compartmentalized strategy, and in the context of decentralization, I say that my model is really relevant. It's actually probably the long-term goal of one of the key things we really need to decentralize, is we need an overall algorithmic approach like I'm talking about. Otherwise, it always is one walled garden of company controlling the most important part, the security of how the data moves around. And if you come up with a more decentralized architectural approach, but it requires you feathering together architecture and required libraries and library tables and a cyber force to watch different potential vulnerabilities and to make security recommendations and requirements in different contexts and core code reviews between different companies for critical layers. They can all agree this is the best way to build this foundational part of the market, and you have to organize for all of that. And that's a national AI and robotics strategy. You'll never be able to scan all code if you don't have an interconnected repository system. So you have to work together on that major market vertical. Now you still have companies like GitHub and others that can try to build more competitive repository features and all of these things. Because again, we have to be able to build this complex strategy for assigning identity ownership to different parts of code libraries throughout this vastly interconnected ecosystem. And then you have to build special data tables. And some of these are critical security features you want Cyberforce teams to manage, or at least, make security recommendations alongside other things that they're approving when companies tether to a general platform. Some of this you can screen with AI to increase volume and efficiency, but you need to have teams that are helping to structure that AI, and this needs to be a well thought out process. We need all of my pieces foundationally in order to actuate all of that. Long enough video, 40-minute video. Again, you can stack the encryption. That's where I almost lost myself, in different ways. Even with my algorithm, you can go up levels above that, but it doesn't necessarily add value anyway, because we need to have this compartmentalized strategy for the encryption anyway, and to have it get to a device, decrypt itself, and then re-encrypt itself doesn't make sense. So you're ultimately going to have one encryption strategy, and it's always better to have a decentralized multiple companies doing it, like in my model. And it's just how best do you optimize architecture at scale then? Well, you need the industry to come together democratically, and you need something like iActuate and Outline. That's the only way that you can really do it. I have Donald Trump, the grounds to all the most important treaty policy, the grounds to the most important strategy we can have to protect the most lives in the Middle East. And in every one of the strategic military capacities we need most right now, I have the best long-term plan for you. Arguably the only real long-term plan. It's debatable whether or not we have a real long-term plan that has the same capacity as mine any other way. I kind of have you, no offense, Donald Trump, Mr. President Trump, I kind of have you a little bit trumped. But don't see me as your enemy. I busted my ass because I wanted to help you. I think that you have some opportunities to be better. People can call me out and say the same thing about me, but we should welcome that. We shouldn't squash people when they say those things. The people that can say it to me, this is maybe my only real difference. The people that can say it to me, I would mostly agree with. There might be some things that I know they don't understand about it, and that's what I can help the world understand. And it's going to help us implement certain technologies. I know it's true. As long as the world is bold enough to have these conversations. Now I can be polite about different parties and try to make sure that they know that I probably shouldn't use certain names. I've done that a couple times. I can be courteous and say, now these people, unless they point themselves out, like you can trust that I've tried to represent them really well. And as long as I can talk about these, I might even use a name here and there. I'll try to get people to forget your names, maybe. Like I won't use your last names. I'll try to get people to move forward from this. And we can learn from this, and we can, if you guys want your privacy, but I can still talk about these things and what I learned and how I know that there's a degree of confusion that I know society is really vulnerable to because of how complex things are, and we need better tools to address that, especially with how we sort through a lot of our geopolitical strategy. And this plan to succeed at this, all of the art of the elements that our nation, our government of the people really needs to know to succeed at this, it's very complicated. It needs somebody to write a book, or if you want to streamline this, we can build these types of pitch tools, and we can try to build an ecosystem where it's way easier to represent ideas and have people with an AI engine gauge completion of ideas, uniqueness of ideas, overall strategy, and how it's being put together. We can try to build AI engines that have this, that can try to gauge how well this is linked together, uniqueness of ideas. They at least send alerts to other people who want to work with similar things, and we can group that really effectively with my model. So, long enough video. IAM Grid, Cyberforce, then get strategic pivot and the education major market verticals in place, because that's what allows us to market this more advanced government to the people. It's what leads to us negotiating to get these cloud platforms implemented in the Middle East, such that we have our anti-terrorist alert system. We have the best ground alert system for advanced Space Force capabilities and military capabilities. Yes, there's going to be a Cyberforce component that really powers that. That's your alert system. That's how you get your data. That's how you actuate some of these decisions. You want to be in control of that. I've got this great model that puts you in control of that, really. Like, it positions you better in the industry than anything else. Like, there's still a way that these other companies could say, we're going to deactivate our security key and take this platform down in some contexts. But there are ways that you could design. There are a lot of things that could be designed. You make your case, and you'll probably get it your way. Okay, so let's move forward now. There's this really complicated plan: mutually assured success, identity, medical records, grids. People want to be able to travel and know that they're not going to have to be. They might not, if they have a medical situation happen, that the hospital that needs to work on them is going to have the information they need to save their life. If there's an accident, anything can happen. So that's something that we want mutually assured success with. These AI anti-terrorist grids are related to identity products. We got to make sure that infrastructure exists. Birth certificate tracking, hospital records. This is part of anti-terrorist tracking software. Again, mutually assured success. You want some of these systems to work together, be designed to work together. You want to position our major market verticals such that we can talk about how infrastructures can be used together as a government of the people. Very important. Arguably the most important capability a nation could develop a strategy to actuate, to lead on the world stage now, is coming up with exactly what I have, the art and how different separation of powers between different markets can work together, but we can still explore that strategy really, really effectively as a team, okay? Probably the most valuable thing a government of the people could seek to do, and I've wrapped it into world peace strategy and the best foundational treaty strategy. That's part of the reason why it's so valuable and the best thing that we could do. Donald Trump, I hope you understand this long-term plan. All veterans, all politicians, I hope that we can get this pushed through this presidency. I've thought of working with, I like some of the things even people like Bernie Sanders says, and some of the Democratic Party goals. I'd like to help other people. Yes, more. I want to do it with respect to the businesses, and I think that the businesses can come up with a dynamic where they compete to try to better serve these market goals. If you give me that, if I can make enough money to build my hospital, all mental health programs will be better for the world. Trust me. Like, we'll be better at mental health overall because I have very specific product goals. And again, we need my system in order to implement a gun control policy that really makes sense. But I mean, I could go into elaborate detail on how this overall product set of opportunities can be built, how this is similar to the education and hybrid learning markets. Like, I have a very elaborate presentation, specific product goals, and how we make it work largely, and how we need to have this overall operational strategy for the industry that enables this different type of collaboration in this major market vertical model. 45-minute video, that's long enough. Thank you, Donald Trump. Thank you, America. Thank you, the world. This is the most important opportunity that we have. This is what the future of geopolitical strategy looks like. This is what some of the key levels of technology, most valuable technologies we can have in the world look like. This is the overall approach that's going to make it work. This is the most valuable strategy on the face of the earth. Even if I can't monetize myself as most valuable, it is overall the most valuable thing. But there are ways that I monetize myself, and I'll probably make, billions of dollars, sure. Billions is already, if I make $5 billion, I've made way more money than I need to. The only reason to make more than that is if you can somehow pass on and you're responsible for passing on key important decisions and control of that management, which is an important thing. Like, we need those important people that, but is it maybe better to have more of those people and create a model where it's a little bit more competitive? Yeah, but I think that's hard to do without controlling the economy too, so it's a delicate balance. Anyway, long enough video. We do want to work together on all these goals. This is how we build a stronger team. Definitely makes sense. Thank you.